Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. It is exactly 18 after 9 o'clock. Welcome to the second hour of the show, very especially to our Polokwane listeners on One Nation FM. We're now going to be talking with water expert Professor Anthony Turton, and we're going to be looking at the water crisis. Did it lead to the cholera outbreak? Some victims of the diarrheal outbreak in Parys and Vredefort believe it could have been caused by the water supplied by the Ngwate municipality. Professor Anthony Turton, a very good morning to you. Nice talking with you after a very long time. Welcome to the show.
Good morning to you. It's been challenging. I've had to turn the generator on because of load shedding, so I lost you and I'm back again.
Okay, we thought as much. We thought it must have been load shedding. Oh, what next for South Africa? Please, God, watch over us is all I say. Let's look at this water crisis. I mean, you and I have been talking long and hard over time about the water situation in South Africa. It's gotten to a point of really a crisis situation, has it not?
Yes, it's been a slow onset disaster for some time now, for at least more than a decade. I used the word slow onset disaster for the first time in 2008. If you go back to that, that period of my unfortunate history. Yes, people are now losing lives, and this is it's absolutely unacceptable situation. In fact, what surprises me is that we haven't had a greater loss of life. But we can just be grateful that the loss of life has been limited, and my deepest sympathies to those who have lost their family and loved ones as a result of this crisis.
So, Professor, what exactly is the issue here? When I spoke to someone from the Department of, not the Department of Health, I spoke to someone from Denosa yesterday. He indicated that the problem seemed to be with the water tankers. I'm asking the question, is there not a problem at the source of the water? Where are we going wrong? Not too long ago, a couple of years back, we had huge issues at the Vaal Dam. I'm not even sure if that has been finally resolved. And this story just seems to gain traction and get worse with every passing day.
Yes, so let's go back to the fundamental basics of it, the facts which are always our best friends. So it doesn't surprise me that water tankers might be the source. This is not an uncommon thing. All across Africa, we know for a fact that contamination tends to occur in your secondary storage vessels. In other words, a person might draw clean water from a tap somewhere, but then it gets contaminated in the storage vessel that they use. That is a well-known tendency, if not a fact in this particular case. And let us also go back to another very important fact I'm going to share with you now, and that is that going back to more than a century or so to the Industrial Revolution time, when the London School of Tropical Hygiene was founded. And the reason why it was founded was they established the link between cholera and drinking water directly coming from sewage. At that point in time, they didn't yet know about bacteria and stuff like that, but they established the causal link between sewage-contaminated water and human health. And that has become the foundation of global human health standards, public hygiene standards throughout the world as a result of that. So it's to be squabbling over what the actual source of it is really quite a moot point. The fact is we produce 5 billion liters of sewage every single day in South Africa, and only about 15% of that gets treated to a reasonable standard before being discharged back into a river. What more can we expect when we are exposing large numbers of the population, large segments of society to water that is partially treated sewage? This is just unacceptable. And unfortunately, we sit in the situation now and we have to bring it under rapid control. And I must say that the Minister of Water Affairs is trying his very best at the moment. I have been in contact with his office. They reached out to me last week. And the minister is going to be establishing some teams later on this week. On Thursday, he's going to be making some announcements. And I don't want to preempt that, but the minister is starting to take this very seriously. But have we reached the bottom of the pit yet? I don't know. Can we get worse? I'm afraid we can still get worse because it's going to take a while to turn this thing around.
Frightening indeed. Okay, we've got a comment from Nakita Giamoy saying, fantastic topic, very pertinent. These statistics are horrific. Obviously, she's referring to the sewage issue and, water that is treated and back into the system to all of us as South Africans. Having said all of that, what about people who are dependent or have possibly access to borehole water? Are they in the same situation as people that rely on tank water and water from their taps?
Well, borehole water is very often contaminated. In
Mm.
fact, it's not uncommon to find all sorts of pathogens in borehole water. Just because it comes out of the ground doesn't necessarily mean to say that it's going to be the best possible water for for potable purposes. And people supplying water out of boreholes are actually legally liable. If human beings are drinking from it. So it's important that that water gets tested by an accredited laboratory and gets supplied at standard known as SANS 241 standard. The reason why boreholes are so easily contaminated is because it's very often they're shallow, and because of the open defecation or the extensive use of septic tanks, etc. There's a direct hydraulic linkage between these shallow aquifers and sources of contamination, which is basically human waste.
Okay, government officials are scurrying around now to try and address the problem. They, making all sorts of site visits and supposed investigations, etc. What needs to happen? Taking them out of the equation because they're going to have all sorts of commissions and all sorts of reports, etc. We need action, and we need action right now.
Yes, I mentioned early on that I spoke about the slow onset disaster in 2008. The slow onset disaster continues to play out. It's like a train wreck that happens one frame at a time, in slow motion. This train wreck is happening around us. It's not going to be an easy thing to resolve because the state of infrastructure in South Africa is so dire at the moment. Just in the water sector, we need 1 trillion rand just to fix what is broken. 1 trillion rand. And there's no way that the fiscus has that money because the tax base of the economy is busy collapsing as a result of the energy crisis. The taxpayer will be unable to pay for that bill. So I'm afraid we're going to enter into a new kind of future where capital is going to have to come from alternative sources through some kind of public-private participation model. And that is also going to need to have a restoration of investor confidence in South Africa. So, what I'm sketching here is not just the sewage crisis itself. The sewage crisis is, and the human health crisis is really a focal point, but of something far bigger. And that bigger thing is the slow demise of the economy, the slow loss of investor confidence, the inability to create jobs. And, let's just go back to a very fundamental definition of poverty. And really, as basic as it gets, poverty is always associated with poor human health and with the non-availability of water or access to contaminated water. That is literally the very definition of poverty. And this is what's happening to larger and larger portions of South African citizens today, which is simply unacceptable.
Sadly so, sadly true. We look at the scenario, which is really very dire, but I referred to in the opening statement, I referred to the situation at the Vaal Dam a little while ago, several years ago. I'm not sure if that has been resolved yet. You may know about that or where they at regarding resolution on that matter. But as we speak, a similar issue is playing out or has started playing out a couple of months ago or maybe a couple of years ago, and is still extant in KZN. They have a huge problem with their leaking, their failing infrastructure as far as sewage, etc., is concerned. It's even spilling out into rivers and the sea. Do you know anything more about that? Apart from needing 1 trillion rands to fix all of this, how do people move forward? And I also know that there's a lot of active citizenry, both with the Vaal situation and in eThekwini. But that's not enough. They need the support from government, do they not?
Yes, okay, you've asked lots of questions there and that. So I think let's take the last question first. So the thing is, is government going to turn this around? Well, I think I would like to counter that question with another question, and that is government irrelevant anymore? Government is increasingly showing its inability to resolve the problems on behalf of society. And I mean, let's look no further than the political squabbling that's happening in how many different municipalities around the country, where the ruling party is unable to reach a majority anymore. So therefore, they are forced to form coalitions with other weaker parties, and those coalitions are inherently unstable. And so they're busy squabbling over who's going to become the mayor and who's going to get access to what portfolio with how much money in it, while people are dying of cholera out there. So this is unacceptable, and I would almost argue that we're at a point where government is becoming increasingly irrelevant, which of course is a frightening thing, because we need to have a relevant government and we need to have a viable government, because that is what any decent economy is based on. That's what any social and economic well-being is based on. So we need to restore those things. In KZN, we know that a significant portion of the KZN economy is based on tourism. We know that the tourism was given a terrible, terrible blow over the last summer season as a result of sewage contamination on all the beaches, etc. Why would people come and spend their holiday where they can't go and swim on the beach because of sewage? And then, of course, we've had those other crises around Mhlanga Rocks area, that fire, the looting, the KZN unrest, all of that sort of stuff. And in fact, we're still reeling from that KZN unrest, that looting spree in 2021, because in many cases, some of the systems that have been damaged from subsequent floods have never, ever been repaired. So, we are just going backwards. So there's a slow backward regression, and this is not in our best interest. So this is I think we need to start calling upon the various political parties to start thinking about creating a government of national unity at local level. And we need to start depoliticizing water and energy, and start reinstating technically competent people into management positions to resolve both the energy and the water crisis. Just this last few days, the newly appointed Minister of Electricity has admitted that he sees no end in sight for the energy crisis. So if that's the case, then why do we need a minister? If he can't resolve it, then what's his role?
Absolutely. He's just costing us as taxpayers more money. But be that as it may, how do we then move forward in terms of preventing ourselves from getting sick till, these greedy politicians, wake up and realize what a dire situation we're in and something needs to be done? How do we protect ourselves from this situation? Because I'm here in Gauteng. I think you're in Bloemfontein. Are you? Or have I got it wrong?
I'm in KZN. My professorship is in Bloemfontein, but I choose in KZN.
Okay. How do we keep ourselves safe in terms of our water usage?
Well, we fall back onto traditional cultural practices. I think this is the best place to start. We learned from our mothers and our grandmothers, basic hygiene. We learned to wash our hands before we eat our food. We learned to wash our hands after we've gone to the bathroom. We've learned to wash our hands and use clean utensils for preparing food. These are all very basic things. There's no rocket science in any of this. So we need to go back to those traditional, very, very basic values that have stood us to good stead for centuries of time. We don't want to go back to the medieval times when people were dying of waterborne diseases. We need to go into the future where we can prosper and reach our full potential as human beings. That's surely what our overall objective should be, just as ordinary South African citizens.
Yeah, dire indeed. Do you see an end in sight, a positive end?
Well, I must say that the current Minister of Water Affairs, Senzo Mchunu, seems to be trying to do things differently. And I say this based on some facts that I'll share with you. Shortly after the minister was appointed, within a week or so of him being appointed, he reached out to a number of experts, myself being one of them, and he wanted to sort of mend fences and see how we could cooperate going forward. So that's good news. I think the real crisis was started by the previous minister, Nomvula Mokonyane, when she suspended the blue and green drop reporting standard, because what that did was that effectively shot the government in the foot They were unable to act in their role as regulator because they simply said, "Well, don't report to us. Don't tell us what the status is of your water treatment plants because we don't want to know." Now that is just an abdication of responsibility and dereliction of duty, and in my view, a criminal neglect. In my view, that one could even consider legal action again of dereliction of duty against that minister. But I don't want to pass too much sort of judgment on that. But I feel very strongly about that. So we need to stabilise that, and certainly the current minister, seems to be doing the best that he can. I've just done an interview a short while ago on one of the other radio stations, and I just drew attention to the fact that part of our problem is, in fact, our constitutional problem. We have there's a constitutional element to this water and sewage crisis that I just need to explain a little bit now, because the presidency the last few days has made a statement that they've been unable to intervene in certain of these crises because of a constitutional clause. And that constitutional clause is what is known as cooperative governance. And what it says is that one arm of government may not reach into the area of activity of another arm, and one tier and one sphere of government may not interfere in the activities of another. So what that effectively does is it provides a hiding place for incompetent ministers to say, "Oh well, we can't do anything about it because the law won't let us do it." But on the other hand, it is in fact a hard stumbling block, because how can you expect the Department of Water and Sanitation to act as a regulator of municipal activities? Because all water service provision in South Africa is a municipal function, not a national function. So how can you expect a national government department to intervene in the affairs of a municipal government department when this particular element of our constitution makes it illegal? So my view is that the constitution in this particular regard is illogical. It is now causing loss of life. It's causing material damage and harm. And I'm therefore appealing to any interested citizen out there to take this matter up. I did reach out a while ago to the Helen Suzman Foundation to ask them if they would litigate this in the Constitutional Court, and they were reluctant to at that stage for various reasons. And I think now, maybe in the light of this cholera crisis, we need to rekindle that flame and let's see if any NGO or any donor or any corporation is willing to fund a constitutional court appeal on this particular matter, because until we can clarify this cooperative governance clause in our constitution, we are always going to provide refuge for incompetent civil servants to say, "Oh, but they can't do anything about it because of that clause." So we have to fix that element of our constitution up. This is just part of the evolution of a constitutional democracy. So I see it as being a healthy evolution, not an unhealthy erosion of constitutionality, rather the strengthening of that constitution over time.
But nevertheless quite a mess, is it not? We will be watching this space quite closely, and wonderful talking with you once again. Fingers crossed that not only our water crisis is resolved, but also the issue around Eskom that gets resolved for once and for all. But I hope to talk with you again sometime soon. You go well. God bless.
Thank you very much.
That was Professor Anthony Turton talking about the water crisis that we find ourselves in at the moment. When I say water crisis, apart from a water shortage, there's also the issue of contamination of our water sources. Lots and lots of people have been affected, have been hospitalized, and upwards of 15 people have already lost their lives due to the cholera outbreak because of this. Standing by to talk to us in a minute or two is another worrying situation. Cheryl Pillay, chairperson of the Yes Movement in Eldorado Park, and she's also a community activist. We're going to be talking about something called, it's a new drug. It is called the lean concoction. So do stay with us.